Welcome to the Final Four edition of the Go Fast and Win podcast powered by the Sharp Plays and TSP.live. I'm going to apologize in advance because the lawn maintenance team is outside doing some work. They got here a little early today, so I apologize if there's a little background noise and you hear a lawnmower out there. This Final Four episode is exclusively sponsored by ProfitX. Visit your favorite app store, download the ProfitX app, and when signing up, use promo code TSP. 100% of ad funds go back in the form of discounts and promotions to you in the TSP audience. ProfitX is a great betting option. Unlike a traditional sportsbook, ProfitX is an exchange, so you won't be kicked out for winning, and they have some excellent prices. I'm able to get action down on ProfitX at prices better than most of the market and with very strong limits. Limits that actually rival many offshore sportsbooks depending on the market. Check them out today. And thank you for using referral code TSP. All right, folks, typical Go Fast and Win podcast format today. I'll get into a topic for the podcast and then dive into the action for the Final Four. But first, I would like to welcome those clients who came on board from the Sports Gambling Hotline acquisition and are now part of the TSP Army. Great to have all of you on the team. So let's dive in. One topic that is an oldie but a goodie because it seems like every gambler, despite long-term results, just can't seem to avoid falling into the same trap over and over and over. So let's talk about something that happens every single year in sports betting, but people still react like it's the end of the world. Right now, TSP Live content as a whole is up 13.7 units on the year. So overall, it's profitable. A positive number is always a plus, and it's averaging 4.5 units per month. But within that performance, there's a specific segment, the Hermes Scores and TSP portfolio, that's down 24 units on the year. Now, the rest of the content is covering that and still producing an overall profit. And it's also important context that the content overall has been profitable for 15 straight years. And specifically, the TSP Live trifecta, which is comprised of Hermes Scores, TSP portfolio, and TSP Insiders, is coming off a plus 107 unit performance in 2025. Now in 2026, that same segment is in a drawdown, as we just discussed. And what happens? Of course, people go into full apocalypse mode. They start thinking this is falling apart, this could turn into minus 100 units, something is wrong. Now, I want to slow that down because what's actually happening here is not a betting problem, it's a perception problem. So let's separate two things. There's what's actually happening, and then there's the story your mind is telling you about it. What's actually happening is simple. One segment is in a drawdown while the overall system is still profitable. What your mind is doing is taking that drawdown and projecting it forward into the future like it's guaranteed to continue. That's the mistake. And this is where a Buddhist lens is actually very useful, even if you don't care about Buddhism at all, because it explains exactly what's going on and what's going wrong in people's thinking. There's a concept in Buddhism, I won't go deep into the spiral here, where the mind takes a real event and then builds a full narrative around it. So instead of people thinking the trifecta is down 24 units, but we've had 20, 30, even 50 unit drawdowns multiple times over just the past 3 years, and we recovered the losses every time and put profit on top. People don't think that way. Instead, the thinking becomes, this is going to get worse, this system might be breaking, this could spiral out of control. But none of that latter thinking there is based on data. It's 100% projection. It's funny because at the end of 2024, we had a 34% drawdown on content that carried from November 2024, through February of 2025, so 4 months. Mind you, 2024 was still a very good winning year, and 2025 brought in over 100 units of profit. Well, 107 to be exact. I said, everyone should now be able to see how this game works. You experienced a long drawdown, you panicked your balls off, but you recovered the profits and then some, and you lived to tell the story. As this drawdown was going on in 2024 into 2025, I made sure to highlight the experience every single day. I thought by highlighting it every day while we were going through it, it would mean that when we got through it and people saw the results on the other side, that we would never have to go through this same discussion yet again when another drawdown came on, years down the line, months down the line, whatever it might be. Yet here we are in a new year discussing a 24% drawdown, not a 34% drawdown like we had 2024 and 2025. So as much as I wanted this discussion to go away so people would finally understand and could move forward and could avoid the panic and apocalyptic thinking, this discussion never goes away because emotional control is so weak for most bettors that it overrides their rational thinking and their memory almost immediately. Another issue is people collapse time frames. They're taking a long-term system, 15 years of winning, and judging it based on a short-term segment. That's like watching one quarter of a football game and deciding the final score, which many gamblers do, which further highlights this defect in the method of bettors' operation. I can't tell you how many times I get messages from people in the first quarter of a football game where we have a team that's -7 and that team is already down 14-0. There's still 45 minutes to go. While not the optimal situation, being down 14-0 as a 7-point chalk, the game is far from over. This sort of immediate doom and gloom mentality doesn't make sense, but emotionally, that's what many people do. Not just gamblers. Regular sports fans often count their team out immediately if they don't get the lead. There's also this hidden expectation that some people don't recognize, some people don't even realize they have it at all. And it's this: if something is real in sports betting, it should just keep winning. But that's not how this works. There is no profitable betting strategy in existence, whether it's following Billy Walters or some magic coin that you have that picks winners, that goes straight up. If it's real, if there's actually an edge, it has to include drawdowns. That's not a flaw. That's part of the structure. So what's really causing the stress, not just in this 24% drawdown, but in every drawdown? It's not the 24 units. It's the resistance to it. It's the expectation that it should not be happening. Not now, not ever for a professional bettor. And once you understand where this stress is coming from, everything becomes a lot clearer. Because now you can see the difference between variance, which is normal, and failure, which is something else entirely. Right now, we're dealing with variance within a system that is still profitable overall. And you don't even have to look to the last 15 years to see the profits. Even just looking 2025 into April of 2026. It's a period of 15 months. We're still well profitable, almost 80 units of profit off that same content that's struggling right now. The correct way to evaluate something like this is very simple. You zoom out. You look at the full system. You look at the long-term performance because that's where the edge shows up. Not in a short-term stretch within a segment of the content. So if you're feeling that pressure right now or that concern, just understand what you're reacting to is not the actual situation. You're reacting to the story being built around it. And the discipline here, the real edge, honestly, is being able to sit through that discomfort without rewriting reality. Because the moment you start projecting the future based on short-term results, you're no longer thinking clearly. You're reacting and you're doing it from a place of emotion, not rational thought. Now, to bring this back to the Buddhist lens, the takeaway becomes even clearer. A Buddhist wouldn't look at this and say, this is a disaster. They would observe there's drawdown, there's discomfort arising, and there is a story forming around the discomfort. And then they would separate those things. They wouldn't confuse the feeling with the reality. They wouldn't project the future based on fear. They would recognize this is temporary, this is part of a larger process, and the reaction is what's creating the suffering, not the drawdown number itself. So instead of reacting, they stay grounded in what's actually true. The system is still profitable. The long-term data and performance is intact. If you just started in 2026 and only played TSP Portfolio and Hermes scores, you still have 76 units of bankroll primed to play progression. If you started before 2026, you have a full wealth of profit under your control. And this moment is just one part of a much bigger sample. So the takeaway is this: the drawdown is real, but the conclusions people are making about it are not. And if you can separate those two things, you not only become a better bettor, you start thinking more clearly than most people in any high uncertainty environment. And that clarity compounds on itself. Because over time, the people who can separate data from emotion make better decisions. And better decisions are what ultimately drive results, not just in sports betting, but in any endeavor. That's the difference. So I'll leave you with this. You ever miss a call from your doctor? Maybe you just had some kind of test done and you get a voicemail that says, "Hey Roger, give me a call back to discuss your results." What happens? Immediately, your mind jumps to the worst case scenario. Oh shit, why would he have to call me? Why do I have to call him back? Fuck, I have cancer, something serious, something life-altering. But there's no actual data supporting that. That's emotion overriding reality. Here's another example. You call your wife or girlfriend on a Friday night while you're out of town and she doesn't answer. You already know where I'm going to go with this. What does your mind do? It doesn't go to she's in the shower, she's away from her phone, she's busy. Nope. You jump straight to something extreme. Oh my God, she's having a 10-guy gangbang in your bed. Or she got into a fatal car accident. Again, zero evidence, just emotion filling the gaps to give you a perceived certainty by creating a narrative. And this is the pattern. Emotion steps in, fills the gap where there's uncertainty, and builds a story that feels real but isn't grounded in data. And the real problem is what comes next. That emotional spike, anxiety, stress, anger, it builds, it escalates. In real life, that can lead to serious consequences, health issues, bad decisions, unnecessary damage. Anthony Bourdain, as someone like myself who loves to travel, man, were his shows my absolute favorite. But Anthony Bourdain, as you know, he killed himself because of photos that would be published of his girlfriend with another man. That's not rational to kill yourself in that situation. That's purely emotion. He was building a narrative of a world he was made to believe he could not live in or that would be too painful to exist in. So he killed himself. That's not reality, it's not data, it's all emotion. He didn't even let reality play out to see how it would go. His narrative is what prompted him to kill himself. And it's no different in gambling. You hit a rough stretch, and instead of staying aligned with the system, you become reactive. You start forcing plays, you abandon discipline, you scrap your entire strategy and framework. The same strategy and framework that brought you profits perhaps for years leading into that run. So as we move forward, this week, this weekend, this month, this year, stay grounded in the actual data, not emotion, not narratives. If you can do that, you'll be shocked what it does, not just for your mindset and your approach to gambling, but your gambling performance as well. So speaking of gambling performance, let's check out what's happening in the Final Four markets. I will first state that the action I'm about to discuss for public and sharp money comes from the in-depth analysis of 3 offshore sportsbooks for which I have direct database access. So things can vary by book, but this connection tends to provide me a pretty good view for extrapolating the entire market as a whole, given the overall client base at these 3 locations. So when it comes to sides and looking at public money, the public is relatively split on Michigan and Arizona. One book points to Arizona, another to Michigan, another almost perfectly 50-50. So when looking at the market as a whole, it's split. On UConn and Illinois, the public at 3 books is small to UConn at all 3, just a little, but definitely there, making UConn a public dog. When it comes to the totals, it's pretty evenly. Both are medium to the over. Illinois, Connecticut, medium to the over. Michigan, Arizona, medium to the over. Pretty much expected. The public loves overs, so nothing really newsworthy there. Sharp money in Illinois, UConn is very interesting. We have medium sharp money on Illinois at -1.5 and -2. We then have medium sharp money on UConn at +3 and small sharp money on UConn at +2.5. Given this action and the levels at these various prices, the books have pretty much settled on 2 or even 1.5 because after the counterbuy on UConn, nothing further came, yet at least, on Illinois. For me, I love these setups because they can make for good in-play action. We see the clear value based on sharp money for both sides of the market. So given our in-play cushion per 20 years of TSP in-play analysis, we would use 5 points for NCAA basketball sides and totals. So you can get this information as a TSP Live subscriber and accessing our preset in-play targets table on the TSP Live dashboard, which is at tsp.live/dash. Anyway, the targets using the pre-market or the pre-game analysis of pricing would point to Illinois +3.5 and UConn +8.5. It gives us 11 possible point options for catching a middle. The question will be if the swings in the game will give us both sides of that middle. But we should get at least one, and if we do, we're still betting a plus EV angle based on market action, even if we can't close the middle. So again, in play, given this information, I would be looking at Illinois +3.5 and UConn +8.5. We'll see on game day where Hermes, if it does have in-play targets, prices these, but based on the preset table, which has performed very well through the years and many people use as their in-play Bible, Illinois +3.5, UConn +8.5 are your in-play targets. On the total, there's medium sharp money on under 140 for UConn and Illinois, and very small sharp money on under 139.5. But then, when that price dropped, there was a small buy on over 138.5, which is why we see price sitting at 139. It's above the sharp money where the sharp money took at the 138.5, and it's below the 140 and 139.5 that the under sharp money took. Sharp money on the side for Michigan, Arizona is not nearly as interesting as UConn and Illinois. We see a medium sharp buy on Michigan at a pick, but then a small sharp buy at -1. Just a small sharp buy there, so it's not really giving us anything. And when you get to 1.5, there's no material sharp money either way at that price, which is why the books seem to be holding that 1.5 for now. On the total, this one is kind of dull there as well. Very, very small sharp buy at over 157.5. So that's the view of the markets here at 12 p.m. Eastern Time as I'm analyzing this on April 2nd, Thursday, when I ran this analysis. It's important to note that, again, it's Thursday, and we have plenty of time until the games for this to change. Not to mention the action which would love to attack on Saturday afternoon when limits are at their highest. So this is the start. Let's see where the action ends. And that'll cover what's going on in the global Final Four betting markets. Good luck ahead this weekend, this month, and this year. And as always, appreciate you tuning into the podcast here in its 3rd season. I'll catch you for any specials between now and football season, but if nothing arises or is worthy of a special podcast episode, then I'll be back right before week 0 with episode 1 of a new season. Thanks for your support. Thanks for following. Take care and stay safe.